Imagine a princess in whose veins flowed the blood of the two greatest empires of her time. On one side, the iron will and majesty of the British Empire, inherited from her grandmother, Queen Victoria. On the other, the enigmatic soul and boundless power of the Russian Empire, passed down from her grandfather, Emperor Alexander II. This was no ordinary princess. This was Marie of Edinburgh, and she was destined for a fate beyond her wildest dreams. She was born in 1875 in Kent, England. In her memoirs, she fondly recalled the place of her birth.
I was born in Eastwell, Kent, in 1875. A big gray house in a huge, beautiful English park. Woods, great stretches of grass, wide, undulating horizons, not grand or austere, but lovely, quiet, noble, an English home.
Her father, Prince Alfred, was the second son of Queen Victoria. As a naval officer, he was often away, and the family followed him across Europe, from misty England to sunny Malta, and then to Coburg in Germany. Her mother, Grand Duchess Maria Alexandrovna, was the only daughter of the Russian Emperor Alexander II. Proud and imperious, she brought to England not just a title, but the entire cold splendor of the Russian court, which never quite managed to take root in the more reserved British society. It was her mother who was the center of the universe for the little princess, who was called Missy at home.
My mother was delighted to have a little girl. She said she liked girls better than boys, and she called me Marie, which was her name and also her mother's. She loved and venerated her mother with all the strength of her soul. Our mother played a greater part in our lives than our father did. He, being a sailor, was often away from home. It was Mama who settled things. Mama to whom we turned. Mama who came to kiss us goodnight, who took us out for walks or drives. It was Mama who scolded or praised, who told us what we were or were not to do. Mama loved us passionately. She adored us, gave up her life to us. But for all that, she had little faith in us. That was the strange, strange thing.
And her father, though more of a rare guest to the children, his visits turned into a real celebration.
He invented a thrilling game for the winter evenings. The lamps were all put out, and Papa would hide in a dark corner pretending to be an ogre. We never knew in which room he was. With fearful trembling, we would crawl through the ink-black chambers, and suddenly, when all danger seemed over, he would spring out from somewhere and catch us whilst we screamed as though he were really going to eat us up.
Perhaps it was this life, full of moves and contrasts, that shaped her character. Unlike many princesses of that time who resembled porcelain dolls, Missy grew up free and willful. She adored horses, nature, and possessed a lively, insightful mind. Her beauty and origins made Marie one of the most eligible brides in Europe, and the first to ask for her hand was none other than her cousin, the future King George V of Great Britain. To Marie, he was her beloved playfellow Georgie, with whom she had ridden horses together in sunny Malta.
There was also another great friend in those Malta days of innocence, and that was Cousin George. Cousin George, though 10 years older than I, was also very young in those days, and not a bit too grand and grown up to be happy in our company. But even today, I can feel what a delicious relief it was to lay my humiliated head upon his shoulder and to weep my heart out, my face hidden in the mass of my yellow hair. I believe that Cousin George's handkerchief was also very welcome on this occasion, because does one ever at such tragic moments find one's own?
"Poor dear little Missy," said Cousin George. "Poor dear little miss." And Missy learned at that hour how very sweet the big grown-up cousin could be. It seemed like the perfect match, but fate, or more precisely, the mothers of the young couple, decided otherwise. They were against the marriage of first cousins. Marie's father wrote to her, "Are you sure you are ready to be Queen of England? It is not only glamour, but also an enormous responsibility." Soon, a new figure appeared on the horizon, Crown Prince Ferdinand of Romania. The shy, silent, and lonely nephew of the childless Romanian king Carol I. He was the complete opposite of the lively and vibrant Marie, and his country, Romania, seemed like a distant and mysterious kingdom somewhere on the fringes of Europe.
The young prince was excruciatingly shy and laughed more than ever to mask his timidity. Curiously enough, it was his extraordinary timidity which attracted me most. How he ever had the courage to propose is today still a mystery to me. But he did, and I accepted. I just said yes, as though it had been quite a natural and simple word to say. Yes. And with that yes, I sealed my fate, opened the door upon life, a long life.
The 17-year-old girl, raised under English skies, was tying her destiny to a man she barely knew and a country she had never seen. The wedding in January 1893 was less a celebration of love and more a dynastic affair.
And then the morning came when I awoke to the sound of bells, festive bells, bells for my own wedding. We had to submit to a threefold marriage: civil, Catholic, and Protestant. The ceremonies took place in the morning and ended with a huge wedding breakfast. I remember it all as though it were a dream, a very far-off dream in which I play the dream part. My wedding dress was of lusterless, heavy white silk, with puffed sleeves, of course, and bell skirts spreading out into a train. I had a dislike of lace veils, so in spite of all the old family lace, I wore tulle, kept in place by a diamond tiara, inside which a small wreath of orange.
The move to Romania was a real trial for the young princess. She fell under the total control of her husband's uncle, King Carol I. He restricted her social circle and tried to turn her into part of the machine he operated. The feeling of isolation was compounded by the gloomy chambers of the palace.
Rich, dark, pompous, unhomelike, inhospitable rooms, all windows, doors, and fixtures, and nowhere a cozy corner, nowhere a fireplace, nowhere any flowers, nowhere a comfortable chair.
Duty, it was all duty. From the early morning when we got up to the evening when we went to bed. Duty, duty. And it was winter, and my rooms were altdeutsch and rococo, and both Uncle and Nando said I must have no friends, because here in this new country, it was dangerous to have friends. Politics, jealousies, intrigues. Once, when asked what I compared myself to, I answered, to a tree which has grown through a stone wall. Already in those very early days, my poor little roots were pressing against the wall.
But it was in this foreign land that Marie found her main calling, motherhood. She and Ferdinand had 6 children, yet she faced a trial here as well. King Carol I considered the heirs to be public property and personally selected their nannies and teachers, effectively removing the young mother from the upbringing of her firstborns.
My children were the central interest of my life. Those of our race are passionate mothers, and we cannot conceive of a world without children. All our work, efforts, and ambition tend towards building them up according to our ideals, making them happy and preparing for them a fine future.
We were a very happy family before the war came to tear so many things up by the roots.
A tragic chapter in her life was the early death of her youngest son, Prince Mircea, who died of typhoid fever during the First World War. This grief brought her even closer to the Romanian people, who saw in her not just a princess, but a suffering mother. Despite a difficult family life and court intrigues, Marie was a devoted mother. The birth of her 6 children strengthened her position in Romania and allowed her to immerse herself more deeply in the life of her new homeland, which ultimately contributed to the growth of her popularity among the people. Europe is in flames. With the death of King Carol I, Marie and Ferdinand ascend to the throne. Romania faces a choice on which side to fight. Many leaned towards an alliance with Germany, but Queen Marie, a Briton by birth, firmly insisted on an alliance with the Entente. Her will played a decisive role. With Romania's entry into the war, Queen Marie dedicated herself to helping the wounded. She did not limit herself to formal visits to hospitals, but worked alongside the Sisters of Mercy, assisting in surgeries and caring for the sick. In the most difficult times, when a typhus epidemic swept the country, the Queen fearlessly went to the epicenters of the disease, helping to fight it. For her selfless work in this field, she was awarded the Medal of St. George, 4th class, by the Russian Emperor Nicholas II. Her devotion to the wounded earned her the love and respect of the entire Romanian people, who nicknamed her the Mother of the Wounded and the Soldier Queen.
But at the same time, ardent desire to help alleviate the suffering of our soldiers was suddenly born within me. Something never before felt rose from the very core of my being, an immense urge towards service, a great wish to be of use, even to sacrifice myself if necessary, to put myself entirely at the disposal of my people. I had a healthy human being's horror of sickness, but I put all my pride into not showing a sign of what I felt. On the contrary, I was always there where the infection was at its climax, gritting my teeth so as to stand the sights and smells. This was indeed an occasion to show my mettle, to prove that I was not only a gay and giddy princess. We were working under difficulties, far from every center, the roads impossible, transport slow. The weather was trying, fierce heat broken by almost tropical rain. At times, our field became a lake of mud through which I waded in heavy riding boots. Our wards were huge wooden barracks, insufficiently lighted, torrid when the sun shone, wet when it rained. The invalids lay on pallets of straw, one stretched beside the other, a mud path running down between the 2 rows of beds. We had no mattresses and next to no linen.
When Bucharest was occupied by German troops in 1916, the royal family was forced to evacuate to Iși. In this dark hour for Romania, Queen Marie became the living embodiment of hope and resilience. She refused to leave the country, despite offers of safe refuge in England, declaring that her place was with her people. Her unwavering determination and refusal to cooperate with the enemy inspired Romanian soldiers and civilians, turning her into a symbol of national resistance. The war is over. In Paris, the victors are carving up a new map of Europe, but the voice of Romania, which had suffered enormous sacrifices, is almost unheard. The official delegation has reached a deadlock. And then the government decided on a desperate move, to use its secret weapon. This weapon was their queen. Marie arrived in Paris. In a world of gray suits and tired men, she was a breath of fresh air. She brought with her not folders of documents, but the force of her personality, a sharp mind, and family ties to half the royal houses of Europe. The first was French Prime Minister Georges Clemenceau, nicknamed the Tiger. He met her coldly, but Marie spoke to him as the granddaughter of Queen Victoria, appealing to honor and allied duty. A conquered Clemenceau would later say, "A lioness like that could tame even an old tiger like me." With U.S. President Woodrow Wilson, she spoke his language about the right of nations to self-determination, and he heard her. In London, she met with her cousin, King George V. Once, he had asked for her hand. Now she was asking him for a future for her country. Queen Marie did not sign treaties. She did something more important. She changed minds and hearts. Soon, the Allies' position softened. Thus, Greater Romania was born, the dream of generations. And this victory had the face of a beautiful and indomitable queen. A diplomat in a tiara. The triumph in Paris was the pinnacle of her life. In 1922, in the city of Alba Iulia, the grandiose coronation of Marie and Ferdinand as monarchs of a united Romania took place. Marie personally oversaw every detail of her appearance, wanting it to reflect the ancient history and greatness of her new homeland.
I want nothing modern that another queen might have. Let mine be all medieval.
And her crown was copied from one worn by Princess Despina, the wife of a 16th-century Wallachian hospodar, prince. Set with rubies, emeralds, turquoises, and giant moonstones. The gold crown weighed 4 pounds and had huge gold and jeweled pendants and hung down over Marie's ears. The queen wore it in the Byzantine fashion, as her attendants wore their diadems, over a delicate veil of gold mesh. "I carry off the huge golden-encrusted crown and overpowering mantles splendidly," she said, comparing herself to the figures of the Virgin, robed and jeweled, carried through the streets of Catholic countries on feast days. The queen's attire was no less impressive.
As the centerpiece, the queen dressed herself in reddish gold with a golden mantle embroidered with local crests and sheaves of wheat, the chief richness of our land. Over her long, straight dress, she hung an extravagant chain of diamonds, ending in a gigantic sapphire that the king bought for her at Cartier as a coronation present.
However, behind all this external splendor and brilliance lay the complex and established relationship of the royal couple, developed over 30 years.
After nearly 30 years of marriage, Marie and Ferdinand had settled into habits of kindly tolerance and devotion toward each other. She bowed to his superiority as king and male in public. He deferred to her in private because he knew she dealt with the world better than he. But aside from rank, Romania, and offspring, they had little more in common at their coronation in 1922 than they had had at their wedding in 1893.
In the 1920s, she became a style icon and the heart of the country's cultural life. She breathed new life into ancient castles, and her trip to America in 1926 turned into a real triumph, where she was met by enthusiastic crowds. For her, this visit was not just a social trip, but a new patriotic mission. Before her departure, she clearly stated her goal.
I depart, taking in my heart the love of my country and carrying it to America, with the thought that there I shall represent and thus serve Romania. It is my wish that my country will keep until my return the same warm remembrance of me which I now take with me, and will follow my travels with the thought that I shall always try to help it.
And America welcomed her on an unprecedented scale. Her arrival in New York was a real event. Moving down Broadway under a shower of confetti and scraps of paper, the Queen was genuinely amazed by the scale of American hospitality.
I was not prepared for the American custom of throwing papers of every size, shape, and description from the thousands of windows of the extraordinary buildings whose tops I could hardly see. The air seemed alive with fluttering wings, as though swarms of birds had been let loose in the streets.
But behind the crowd's enthusiasm and the paper rain lay the true purpose of the visit. to win minds and hearts. And here, Marie proved to be a media personality ahead of her time. She did not hide behind protocol. In the first few hours, she gave 3 interviews, breaking all diplomatic precedents. Instead of polite questions about her health, journalists showered her with sharp topics: her literary activities, the persecution of Jews in Romania, and the political situation of her son, Carol.
She answered everything with ease and disarming frankness, charming reporters and photographers with her smile. The Times newspaper called her meeting with the press probably the most ruthless photographic bombardment that anyone in world history has ever faced. At the same time, the Queen astonished the photographers with her knowledge of camera angles and even admonished her daughter, Princess Ileana, to stop ruining the pictures by waving her hand in front of her face in response to the crowd's applause.
America saw not just a queen in luxurious outfits, but a brilliant politician and diplomat, capable of captivating not only politicians, but also the general public. Her true refuge, her safe harbor, became the palace in Balchik, which she built on the coast reclaimed from Bulgaria. There, among the flowers and white minarets, she found peace. During these years, in search of spiritual harmony, she became interested in the Baha'i faith, which preaches the unity of all religions and all humanity. This was her response to the horrors of the war she had endured. But clouds were already gathering over Europe and over her personal life. The death of her beloved husband, King Ferdinand, in 1927 was a terrible blow to her.
Standing by the side of his bed, she took him in her arms, his head resting on her shoulder so that he might breathe more easily. A doctor took his pulse and warned her that the end was near. His head fell against my shoulder. His already cold hands became limp, his face quite small. It was over. He was no more tired but at rest, she said.
King Ferdinand lay in state for 4 days on a red velvet pall. Marie had given orders that black was not to be used, and she herself arranged the red flowers around his body. She was moved by his face in repose. Such a beautiful face, with his noble features frozen into a stillness which gave him a grandeur which was not his in life, she said.
In life, he was too modest, too timid. He always seemed to be excusing himself for everything he did. Now, without any more gestures, he was calmly accepting all the honors paid, all the flowers, prayers, tears.
Soon after, the relationship between Queen Marie of Romania and her son, Carol, turned into a dramatic story of power, betrayal, and family strife, reaching its peak in the 1930s, when her son systematically stripped his mother of her influence and ultimately exiled her from the country's political life. The culmination of this process was the harsh restrictions imposed on Marie in the winter of 1936-1937, which broke her spirit and royal pride. Her eldest son, Carol, in contrast, was a source of scandal from his youth. His first morganatic marriage to a commoner, Zizi Limbrino, was annulled, and in 1921 he married Princess Helen of Greece. But even the birth of their son, Mihai, the future king, did not deter him from a new scandal. A passionate affair with Elena Magda Lupescu led to a separation from his wife and forced Carol to renounce his right to the throne and leave the country in 1925. But 5 years later, in 1930, taking advantage of political instability, Carol carried out a daring coup. He secretly returned to Romania, deposed his own son, Mikhail, and on June 8, 1930, was proclaimed King Carol II. Initially, Marie, like many in Romania, hoped that his return would bring stability. However, these hopes were quickly dashed. Carol II immediately began to consolidate power in his own hands, seeking to establish a personal dictatorship. One of the main targets in his struggle for absolute power was his own mother. He saw her immense popularity and political authority as a direct threat to his rule.
You wished all honors, all rights for yourself exclusively. An immense mistake. A king's family is the wood which protects the central tree. Romanians consider your family part of yourself. We all together are the dynasty, and in honoring me, they are still honoring you. Have you not enough honors? Can it make you shine less because some still remember and love your mother?
Carol II launched a targeted campaign to discredit and isolate Queen Marie. He removed her from any participation in political life and systematically worked to undermine her popularity. He spied on her and alienated other members of the royal family who were unwilling to sever ties with Marie.
I may be forced to accept your rules and orders, but I do so under protest, and this protest I shall not silence. I consider it as an attack against my personal dignity. Therefore, what I ask, even demand, as my right, give my house the position of independence it had before. You can do it. I have deserved this. Give me your hand, my son, and let us live in good peace and content. It can be if you leave my house alone, respecting my rights and treating me with all the respect you owe to the one who was a builder a long time before you. I am a peaceful being, but I am not a slave, and shall never consent to being one.
Marie was effectively exiled from Bucharest. She spent most of her time at her residencies in the countryside or at her summer palace in Balkik on the Black Sea coast. This directive was not just an administrative restriction, but a profound personal and public humiliation. It stripped Marie of her status as an independent political figure, even one without real power. For a woman who considered herself the face of Romania and had dedicated her life to serving the country, this was tantamount to a complete downfall. Carol had attacked the very core of her identity as a queen, striking a blow to her royal pride.
In an undated letter written sometime during that winter and scrawled over 20 pages, Marie fought back at her son. Every mortal bourgeois has the right to address himself to the authorities. And suddenly, after 43 years, I am put under tutelage. Nothing could make me accept this.
She dedicated her final years to writing her memoirs, wanting to tell the story of her incredible life herself. But soon, the sharp decline in Queen Marie's health, once famous for her energy and resilience, began in the summer of 1937. At the age of 61, she faced a severe illness that led to her death within a year, exacerbated by the emotional suffering from the conflict with her son, King Carol II. The first symptoms appeared as internal bleeding, which confined the queen to her bed for over a month. The court doctors could not determine the exact cause of the bleeding and suggested a diagnosis of cirrhosis of the liver. This was baffling, as Marie hardly ever consumed alcohol. However, the Queen's personal physician, Dr. Castellani, held a different opinion. He diagnosed Marie with pancreatic cancer, which many believed to be the true cause of her condition. The prescribed treatment was harsh: a strict diet of cold liquids, injections, and complete bed rest. The illness quickly sapped her strength. At times, the Queen was so weak she could not even hold a pen. She passed away on July 18, 1938, at 5:38 p.m., 8 minutes after falling into a coma, on the brink of a new world war that would tear apart the country she had helped create. It seemed an entire era ended with her death.
Marie's private secretary assured friends that the end had been peaceful and without a struggle. She slipped into eternity without any pain, no agony, no consciousness of death, just a slow soaring into the world beyond.
In her will, she requested that her body be buried in the tomb of the Romanian kings, but her heart was to be removed and placed in a special casket. She willed it to be kept in the small chapel she had built in her beloved Balkak. In 1940, when southern Dobruja was ceded to Bulgaria by a peace treaty, Marie's heart was moved to Bran Castle. Her heart, which had beaten so strongly for Romania, was to remain forever with her land and her people. Before 1971, the Queen's heart was kept in the chapel of Bran Castle, and when the chapel was closed due to disrepair, it was moved to the National Museum of History in Bucharest. In 2015, following a request from the royal family, the heart was moved from the museum to Pelishor Castle, the place where Queen Marie died. The ceremony of transferring the heart of Queen Mary of Romania took place on November 3, 2015. Before Marie's death, she wrote a letter to her countrymen. It was a long document, touchingly overstated, exactly the sort of letter one might have expected her to leave.
When you read these lines, my people, I shall have crossed the threshold of the eternal silence. And yet, because of the great love which I have pledged to you, I wish to speak to you again. I have become yours for joy and sorrow. When I look back, it is difficult to say which was greater, the joy or the sorrow. I believe the joy was the greater, she said, but too long was the sorrow.
Time erases the names of kings and the borders of empires, but some personalities prove stronger than time. Marie of Romania entered history not just as the last queen consort of Romania. She was the mother of the wounded, an architect of victory, and a symbol of the nation. An English princess who gave her heart to a foreign country, she became more than just its ruler. She became its soul, a soul that lives on to this day in the legends and memory of the Romanian people. That's all for today. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more content like this, be sure to hit the subscribe button and don't forget to ring the bell so you don't miss new episodes. Your like and comment are the best support for me. Thanks for watching and see you soon.